everybody, James W. Falcon here, and thank you for joining us for segment number 3 of the ongoing series and documentary called That Dude Called Dad. We appreciate your attention and thank you for letting us come into your homes to be on your desktop computers, your laptops, your tablets, your phones, and any other mobile devices on which this particular channel, the Encouragement is Key channel, can be connected with. So thank you so much for your time and attention. So this is segment number 3 in the ongoing series, That Dude Called Dad. Segment number 2, I talked about the importance of good communication. Segment number 1, I talked about being a man of substance, why it's important to be a man of substance. Segment number 3, like the previous 2 segments, and in keeping with and being consistent with the theme and the whole goal of this series, the whole point is the need to counterbalance the negative perception of African American fatherhood, number 1. Number 2, hope it serves as an encouragement and some kind of a piece of education in terms of what some of the important aspects of being a dad are. Doesn't matter what race you're from or what culture, it's just important that certain elements, I think, have some real benefit. And so my dad was not a perfect man, nor am I. And I certainly hope as a man to men, you are not laboring, living, loving, learning, with the weight on your shoulder that you have to be a perfect person either, because that's not what this is all about. Okay, so this is just awesome. And again, I have to just pause for another second to say thank you to everyone who are keeping us in your thoughts and prayers, and for your intent mingled with our intent that this just takes off and can really help everybody that gets a chance to view this. So thank you so much for all of your support. I want to also say that if you have any questions or comments regarding this segment or any of the others, or if you have any questions, concerns, or suggestions regarding the Encouragement is Key channel, please do me a favor and email those to me. My name is James W. Falcon, the founder, creator, host of this particular segment, but the founder and creator of Encouragement is Key and the Encouragement is Key channel, and all of the subsidiaries and subdivisions of that. So I'll give you some information about that in just a second. But any suggestions, comments, anything you want to make, praise reports, hey, this is what I want to let you know, James, as to how this particular documentary or segment has been helping or providing some hope and encouragement. Email me at encouragementiskey2013. That's encouragementiskey2013 at gmail.com. Encouragement is key 2013, all together, no spaces, no commas, no hyphens, no underscores, all together at gmail.com, and I will be happy to respond. Okay, so today's lesson, I'm going to pull on your heartstrings a little bit. At least I hope to, because this is a heartstring kind of a message. And today's message is, if we want to make sure we put titles to all of these things. So today's message is from a man to men, from a father to father. We're going to use the title, It's Okay to Be Human. It's okay to be human. And let's use as a subtitle, What Happened to Me When I Saw My Dad Cry. It's okay to be human. And I'm going to talk to you about what happened to me the day I saw my dad cry. I was, again, around 12 years old at this particular point, if I remember correctly. And up until this point in time, I don't really know that we had things that affected us as a family to the degree No, I take that back. Actually, we had tons of things that affected the family unit to the degree that it would prompt my mother or father to cry. It's unfortunate that my dad was one of four. My mother was one of 12 siblings. And it's unfortunate that in growing up, at least on my mother's side up until this point in my life, the age I just mentioned, that we had had a number of passings of some of my mother's brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles. So the whole process of mourning and going to funerals, I had become familiar with. I'm not going to ever say used to, but familiar with, because we had had a number of passings by this point in my life as a child. It's not that my dad wasn't close to or didn't know or mourn or have the passing of his wife's side of the family members pass on, and if he ever cried up until this point, I didn't see him. I didn't witness that. But on this particular day, my dad and mom and I, we were in the kitchen, and that's where we spent a good portion of our time. There was a television set on the counter there. So in between meals, a lot of times, rather than going into the living room or any of the other rooms, we would hang out in the kitchen. So we're hanging out in the kitchen. And at this one particular time, my dad got the news that his second to oldest brother died. And I remember when he got that news, I remember sitting to the left of my dad. He sat at the end of the kitchen table. My mother was right behind me at the kitchen sink. And I can't remember who gave the news, how it came into the house, but I remember it clearly. My mom walked behind me to the kitchen sink, and she was really still. And I remember my dad looked up, and he put his head in his hands as he sat there at the kitchen table, and he cried. And I remember him crying out loud. I remember him crying to the point where his shoulders shrugged. I remember him like it was a deep cry. And again, if that had ever happened prior to that, I missed it. But this moment really affected me. And I remember thinking first, wow, I didn't know superheroes hurt like that. It's kind of what I was thinking, to some degree. Because my parents were just incredible people. I mean, it was along the same time frame where, again, I was starting to understand that my parents were in fact human, and at some point they were going to die. Like those things hadn't affected me. They hadn't set in as aspects of reality up until this point. And the fact that these superheroes also hurt, bleed, mourn, those things really hadn't impacted me, believe it or not. And certainly against, even at that young age, the stereotypes and things that I either heard people say, witnessed men telling their sons especially, or however else and whatever other ways there were out there in the world, my little world, I knew that there was a stigma around boys and men crying. But my dad and my mother, but my dad was really, really honest and open and human to allow me to see this. Certain people go through different things, and when it comes to really having breakdowns, especially African Americans, older African Americans, it used to be a time where they would tell the children to leave the room, or they would, separate the children. And I'm sure other cultures do this as well. I know it's just not an African American thing, but I think it's part and parcel of the fact that adults want to experience adult-like things, and I think there's a love that they're trying to communicate in sheltering their children from that aspect of reality. I'll just say it like that. That's what I know it to be the case now. My parents didn't do that. And if they did, it was rare. But in this particular moment, and I remember sitting there in the kitchen chair kind of looking up at my dad. And I remember thinking, wow, what in the world has happened to cause this man to cry like this? I mean, I understood loss. I understood death. I understood funerals. I understood the relationships, are stressed and torn when a person dies. I understood that. I understood that my dad was very, very close to his siblings. I understood his love for them, and I understood their love for him. But again, I couldn't connect the dots. Like I understood all of that, but somehow in my mind, I guess I thought my dad was a big enough person that it just never dawned on me that in his bigness, quote unquote, that there was that human element and aspect where he could still feel to the point to cry. I guess also at that point in time, apart from the stigma that men shouldn't cry and they wanted their sons to be, boys that didn't cry, I guess even before that was just thinking that what is it and how deeply are you touched? Like, what areas of your person are touched by these circumstances? That was another thing that was really difficult for me to understand. And this gigantic, enormous person, this iconic figure in my life, put his hands to his face. Buried his face in his hands at the kitchen table, and he wept. I'm incredibly thankful to my dad for that. Because apart from stigmas, and apart from the what should be's or what shouldn't be's, my dad, a real man. I often jokingly say to people, I'm 150% man. And by that I mean I'm a man plus. And that's just not because I happen to be a bigger than average dude. But I say that because I like to think in my mind that I understood what it means to be a man. I'm kidding myself. If I am 150% man now, my dad was at least 200 to 300% man all my life, right? So I'm looking at this 300% man, this dude with a 17-inch ring finger, this big cat sitting at this table, this boss, if you will. I'm looking at this man cry like a baby. So it stands to reason. 2 Father's Days ago, I was sitting at the dining room table here, and my children were showering their love on me for Father's Day. And I cried very easily. And I remember my oldest daughter and said, "Daddy, you crying? Are you going to cry?" "Oh my goodness, Dad," and it was a joke and we laughed, and that's fine. I was fine with that, no doubt about it. But, and I still cry very easily when things affect me. I got kind of choked up in the first segment as I was recounting some of the memories and things that my dad said and did. And I'm sure I'll probably either come to tears or get near, coming to tears in any of these segments. And you know what? I'm fine with that. Your manhood, men, is not diminished at all for your tears. There's nothing that takes away from you being a man because you cry. Now, being a whiny, whimpery person because of life is a whole different, segment that would need to be had. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you hurt, when you have been affected deeply, or if you are celebrating. I have cried when I've heard good news. And but let me tell you, as a man that believes that he was mentored and fathered and taught by a real man, I'm going to tell you that if my dad did it, it's okay for me to do. So going back to the Father's Day experiences with my kids, they are very used to Dad shedding tears. As a matter of fact, in that whole gift-giving exchange and process, I remember reading a card that was given, and I broke down and cried like a baby. And we try to do all the cool things like bite your lip, before we do the, we try to do all, the bottom lip quivers. You try to suck it in and do all of those manly things to not burst into tears. And I understand that. Trust me. That definitely makes sense to me. But I think what's important in the exchange that I had and what I witnessed with my dad is a real key point that as a man I want to share to the men watching. Be your wife's or your woman's hero. Be your children's rescuer. Be your children's playmate, right? Get down on the floor, play with them if you have small children. Be their advice giver or be their listening ear and their comforter, especially as a dad of girls to dads with girls, but even with boys. Everybody needs comforting, right? Don't be afraid to put your arms around your children and hold them. Don't be so quick to say to them, stop crying. Don't make the mistake of being a dad to your sons or daughters and say, boys don't cry or little girls don't cry. That's foolishness. Let them be human and be man enough to let them see you be a human being as well. We have been made in God's image. I truly believe that. And if Jesus could weep, then why wouldn't we? If he could be a person touched by the loss of friends, and we were made in God's image and likeness, then what would ever make us think that we shouldn't also be human enough to cry? If you are human enough to be angry, righteously indignant about things. I get very angry when I feel like somebody is mistreating my children. You don't want to get between James W. Falcon and my kids and be on the wrong side of that. Am I a threatening person? Absolutely not. But am I a protective person? Absolutely. God didn't make me this big without a purpose. And I'm going to use whatever I can to make sure my children are protected. And I'm going to use this same man to make sure that they are comforted. And bigger and broader than that, I'm going to show them that being human in all aspects is quite okay. Being a father is an incredible responsibility. What we have to be able to do is to model certain behaviors for our children to see and understand. My dad was the kind of dad that cooked. My dad was the kind of dad that was very patient and allowed me to ask however many questions I needed to, and was always tolerant of my learning process. And I'll share more with you on that and those topics in later segments. And I'm sure, like most adults, people, human beings, parents, I'm sure he came to wit's end at different points in time, and I don't remember him ever showing me. But that's all part of what it means to be human. So, as a parent, to parents, if you are frustrated sometimes with your children's learning process and with the many, many questions, I get it. I'm with you. I'm there. We're human beings. But let's make sure we present to our children, dads especially, let's make sure we present to our children a well-roundedness, a well-rounded understanding of what it means to be human. My dad was a hearty laugher. Like, he would laugh very hearty. Had a belly, so his belly would jiggle like Santa Claus when he laughed. You know, came from deep down somewhere. He was very passionate about family, food, fun, fellowship. You know, he was really passionate about these things, and he did a really good job in showing me what it means to be a well-rounded human being and a well-rounded man. You know, I don't think there's any better compliment a person can get than from those in the immediate circle around them, and especially of men from their wives. And I remember my mom telling me many times when I was a kid, before my father passed away and after, she would say to me, "Son, I want one thing from you. I want you to be a man." And she would say, "I want you to be a man." And then she would say this, "like your father was a man." She said, "You know what? I love your father to death." She said, "I can never think of being loved by another man since your dad and I got married." And she said, "You know why? Because your dad is a man." And what she meant by that was he aspired to be successful. He owned his faults. He was understanding of the consequences of his actions. And he loved her, my mother, without limit, without boundary, without, hesitation. And he gave that same love to my brother and I and to everybody around us. He loved. He lived, he laughed, he learned, and he cried. It's unfortunate because there would be two other announcements, that my dad would get after that one, telling him that his other brother and then his baby sister had died. And I remember seeing my dad in those instances as well, very upset. I remember especially when my aunt, his sister, died, he was particularly touched because they were very, very close. She was the last of the three of them to pass, my dad being the last. And I remember just the year before my dad died, we got a call from my cousin that my aunt had passed away, and it was a sudden kind of a thing. And I remember watching my dad, thinking to myself, yeah, I'm sure he's going to cry. And I saw him like, I don't think I've ever seen my dad as really, like he just didn't cry. Like he was, I think it had really hit him that all of his siblings were gone, and I can only imagine what that must have felt like. So in addition to the tears, there was just, he was befuddled. He was beside himself and sad. And I know he would have preferred to have shown me that aspect without having to have experienced the physical loss of family members. But in those cases, we obviously don't get a chance to write those scripts. And I'm really appreciative of this human component that he showed. Though he was a superhero, he was incredibly human. And I'm thankful for the lesson that I learned on the day that I saw my dad cry. Men, what are you afraid of? Men, be human. Please don't excessively burden yourself into thinking that your responsibility as a man means bearing hurt without showing it. I'm going to tell you as a man, the worst thing in the world you can do is to be in pain and to not say anything, or to prevent yourself from showing the emotions that are natural. I'm building this incredible network called Encouragement is Key because in 2010, I had the toughest year, I guess from 2010 through most of 2011, probably up to 2012. I had the toughest time of my life. I don't know what you would call it. Hitting the wall, having a nervous breakdown, being distraught, discouraged. However you want to be able to describe that mindset, but I was there. And I remember thinking to myself, hey, I'm putting it on display. Why isn't anybody listening or responding? But I hadn't communicated. I had gone through all the changes privately. But yet I thought it was on display enough for everybody else to see and to know. And it wasn't until I came to the realization that yes, I am in pain. Yes, I am hurting to a degree that I've never hurt before. And most importantly, yes, I need to reach out to somebody. And at that point in time, at 40 years old, my mother was very ill. Later, right after this exchange I'm about to tell you about, my mother passed away. But I went to my brother. And I went to my sister-in-law and I sat down and shared where I was mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And after 2 hours of sharing with them where I was, they looked at me and they said two things that were incredibly important to me. They said, number one, little bro, we had no idea what you were going through. Now, a lot of things make sense. And the second thing, I'll never forget it because it came from the mouth of my sister-in-law, an incredibly godly woman. And she said to me, she said, little bro, don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever keep all of that stuff inside and not come to us or get some kind of help. And those two things from my brother and sister-in-law just a few short years ago have transformed my life. That's why Encouragement is Key was founded and created, is because I realize there are people out there that are hurting that need encouragement, and they need it around the clock. Being destitute, being discouraged, being in mindsets and in mind frames that leave you without energy and depressed. They don't happen on normal schedules. Sometimes it hits you like a ton of bricks. Sometimes you find yourself in incredibly dark emotional places at all hours of the night. That's why Encouragement is Key was created. Because of my experiences and because of the place that I was in that was incredibly dark, and thinking to myself, there's got to be somebody else out there that feels like I do. Let me turn from being inward to turn to being outward, and maybe I can help somebody in the mindset that I was in. from my dad, who showed me, beyond showing me that it's okay to cry, what he showed me was that superheroes, men can cry. And then it was my brother, that other incredibly strong man that I look up to and have since my dad's passing as a father figure. And then his wife, the dynamic duo, this incredibly godly woman who has served as a spiritual mentor for me. Both of them together said to me, little bro, we had no clue, which let me know I had gone that long hurting and hadn't said anything to the right people. Number one. Number two, and then she said to me, my sister-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, don't you ever do that again. She wasn't reprimanding or scolding me, but she was admonishing me with love, saying, you don't need to do that. Stop trying to carry the burden by yourself. That's why God gives you friends and family members. It's okay to be human. And on the day that I saw my dad cry, it was part of a seed sowing process that unlocked an incredible door for me, providing a basis for emotional, psychological, spiritual healing, and allowing me to connect with folks in my moment of need. As a man, I am a stronger man, I am a healthier man, and I am becoming a better man as a result. Men, fathers, women, mothers, whoever you are watching this broadcast, assess your current situation. Assess your lives. If you are hurting because of your fault or somebody else's, guess what? It's okay. It's okay to be human. Just do this. Do what I did. I tell my kids all the time, baby girl, you're smarter than me. The only difference between you and me right now is time and experience. And I say that to them to have them understand, if I, who only typically has 2 brain cells firing at one given time, if I can figure these things out, you, being the much more intelligent of the two, can not only figure it out, but I want you to walk it out and act it out. So I'm going to tell you, James W. Falcon, to you, it's okay. Hurt happens, but reach out to somebody. Professional help and counseling, spiritual help and guidance, having really confidential conversations with your close family members. Hopefully you have siblings like I did, brother and sister-in-law, maybe a living mother and father that unfortunately I don't have. There are scores of cousins that I have I have. Do you know what I have? I'm going to tell you what I have. I have a friend of mine. We've been boys for years. And I'm going to say this so that it hits, the blog talk, internet, TV, airways. This is critical. Let me tell you what I have. I have a brother in my corner. Husband, father, incredibly godly man, good friend of mine. And you know what we have? We have a system called SOS. And that means, that's the International Hailing System of Distress, right? And when I feel like I'm in a mindset that's not healthy, I send a text message and I type SOS. And within a reasonable amount of time, this incredibly good friend of mine, another good, solid man, he picks up the phone. Hey, brother, what's happening? Where are you? What mindset are you in? Do I need to come get you? Do we need to send some help? Like, what's going on with you? And in turn, I am there as a support for him. We call it SOS. When you get an SOS, you step out of meetings, you step away from wherever you are, because there's somebody on the other end that's recognized that they're in a weird situation and they just need to get help, talk it out. And guess what? It's not at convenient times. Sometimes I have to, step away from some heavy responsibilities that I have. Why? Because I made a commitment to my friend, like my brother and sister-in-law made to me, like several of my cousins made to me, certainly like my mother and father made to me when they were alive, and so many other friends that I don't have time to mention and thank. But this particular friend, this is a system we have. I got a fraternity brother right now, several of them, that I can call, and on the basis of our fraternal bond, I've got a pastor and dear friend right now that I could call, and on the basis of our relationship, these people will come to my rescue, and I in turn will come to theirs. And so I ask you, see, because I have this network of people, and guess what? They didn't just all of a sudden appear. They've been there the whole time. The difference is I'm recognizing two things. Number one, I'm in need. And number two, I'm going to go to one of them and share that need. If any of this has made sense, if any of this has helped, whether you're man, woman, boy, or girl, then I'm thankful. And here's when I'm going to try not to cry. Because I am determined that my pain has a purpose. I didn't have sleepless nights. I didn't have weary moments. I didn't have times in my life where I didn't know if I would be able to go on. I didn't cry as much and as often as I did. I didn't worry. I didn't wander. I didn't scratch my head, raise my brow, bury my head in my arm and cry. I didn't go through all of that for nothing. I am determined that my pain will have a purpose on planet Earth. That's why I created Encouragement is Key. Because in my darkest moments, I heard the voice of my very first pastor, an incredibly godly man, Pastor Donald Davis, who I spent some time with. And every time I would talk to Pastor Donald, every time I would talk to him in person at church or on the phone, he would always say this, Brother James, I could hear him now, big dude, about 6'8". He would say, Brother James, be encouraged, son. He would leave me with that thought every single time. And I'm thankful for his wife, Pastor Precious, and their ministry that still continues here in Randallstown, Maryland. Incredibly good, solid people, family. But that seed of encouragement was sown. And in those darkest moments, I could hear Pastor Donald's voice. Be encouraged. Be encouraged. Be encouraged. Be encouraged. And I say to you today, be encouraged. Be encouraged. Be encouraged. And to be encouraged, realize the need. And then reach out to get the help that's necessary. This has been James W. Falcon for this third segment in the documentary and ongoing series called That Dude Called Dad. I thank you so much for your time and your attention. Do me a favor. Share this link. Tell people about this series if it's helping you at all. If any good is coming out of this, then I'm thankful for that. And share this with anybody that you feel that might need it. And certainly hang on to it for yourself. What I always tell my friends is, if I'm able to come to their rescue, I always leave them with this thought. And I say, you know what? Hey, I hope you heard what I said, because I may need it back from you in a couple of days. And if you who understand the cycles of life, you know exactly the strength and the power of that statement. So from me to you, be encouraged. Hang on to these words. I'll need them back, and I'm sure somebody else will as well. Thank you. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to cry. And it's okay to be human. Until the next time, take care. And whatever you do, and however you do it, get, be, and stay encouraged. Take care.